Hello, today we are going to have a look at LittleNavMap. It's a free open source navigation assistance application that you can use with Flight Simulator and X-Plane. It's a very powerful program. I thought today we'd just have a very quick look at how we install it and connect it. So you can see I've downloaded it from the internet. If you go to littlenavmap.org, if I just backspace through that, it will redirect to the project homepage, which is Alex is the guy that writes it, and the download link is right here for various different operating systems. So normally you would go and grab the Windows version and it will just download it. Now I'm not going to bother doing that because I've already done it. Once you've downloaded it, if you're using it with X-Plane, you will need to install a small plugin into X-Plane. If you're running it with Flight Simulator, you won't need a plugin. It natively sees Flight Simulator through SimConnect. So once you've installed it, you will have C program files LittleNavMap, and inside LittleNavMap there's a folder called LittleXPConnect. So what you will do is copy that folder, for example, and then you will go to where you've installed X-Plane, and in my case I've installed X-Plane in C program files 86, Steam Apps Common, X-Plane 11 because I installed it through Steam. You will go to the resources subfolder, the plugins subfolder, and there you can see there's the various plugins I've got, and you will copy that folder from the LittleNavMap folder into here, so you can see it's here on mine, and I did it in May of this year. So there's a LittleXPConnect, so I just drag it in, and then the next time I launch X-Plane it will be there. And we can go and have a look at that. I've got a copy of X-Plane up here and running. And if I go and have a look in the menu and go and look at my plugins and show the plugin admin, you can see LittleXPConnect will be sat there, and there's a tick box to say it's running because plugins run by default if they're in the plugins folder. So let's pause X-Plane so it doesn't make a load of noise, and we're going to Alt tab across to LittleNavMap. So I'm running the application here, and there's the map. You can't see my aeroplane on the map. You can see a cross. I'll get to what that is in a bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is configure it to see my Flight Simulator. So I'm going to go to Tools and Flight Simulator Connection. You can see here, connect directly to a local FSX or Prepare 3D Flight Simulator is selected. So when you install LittleNavMap, it will notice which simulators it has available. So we can connect directly to a local X-Plane simulator, and we can say connect. So it's showing my aircraft and a number of other aircraft. Those are the AI aircraft that I had in Flight Simulator, in X-Plane. So if I go back into X-Plane and go in flight and flight configuration, and I go and knock out all of those AI aircraft. Done. Apply. If I come back and look at Little X-Plane, you can suddenly see they've all vanished because the simulator isn't seeing the aircraft, therefore the map isn't. And therein lies a trick. I'm just going to go and pause X-Plane, otherwise we're going to hear the cabin crew and things like that in the 737. Therein lies a trick. As long as your simulator can see aircraft, they will appear on the map in LittleNavMap. Therefore, if you're using JoinFS or VATSIM or anything like that, they can appear through here. There's another story with VATSIM or any of the popular networks, which we'll get to, because you can also show them through a different route into the map. But for the moment we can see I've got my aeroplane on the map, and that really doesn't do much to help us, does it? So there's a trick. The first time you run LittleNavMap, it will ask about scanning your Flight Simulator database, or the data behind your Flight Simulator, to look for all of the airports, the navaids, the ILSs, and all, everything that you could possibly imagine that's in the Flight Simulator's database. So if you go to the scenery library menu, you can do this again after the fact, because say for example you went and added scenery to your simulator, or perhaps you said no during install that you didn't want it to scan your simulator because you were worried what it was going to do. Here's the thing, it's only going to look, it's not going to change anything. So I could kick it off again, I could say load scenery library. So you get the option here, if you've got multiple simulators, you'll have the option of showing whichever simulator's data on the map you want. So I've only got one simulator installed at the moment, so only X-Plane is available. It's worth pointing out, as of September 2020, LittleNavMap does not understand Flight Simulator 2020 yet. I imagine it's in progress. So we can load scenery library, and it's asking me first which simulator I'm talking about, so it knows how to look at the data and where it lives in the system. So again, you can see it's remembered from last time when I pointed it at the X-Plane folder. So it's looking for the route path of wherever your simulator is. If I was to say load, it would go and read all of the data from the X-Plane scenery database. If this was Flight Simulator, it would read all the Flight Simulator scenery data. So what does that give us? I have purposely switched everything off, so we couldn't see everything to start with. I'm going to start switching things on. So, show airports with hard runways. And there you go. It's worth pointing out I can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel, so we can see the world. And you will notice it's drawing things differently based on the zoom level. That's all configurable. I'm not going to get into it in this demonstration. So I'm zooming back in with the mouse scroll wheel. You can see my aeroplane is sat at Stansted. If we keep zooming in, it will show more and more information about the airport. X-Plane in its standard scenery is very good in terms of the airport layouts. Flight Simulator isn't quite so good. But it's going right down to the stands, so you can see each stand, you can see the letters for the taxiways. So that's really useful when you're being given taxiing instructions. So what else can we do? If we zoom out, we can see airports with soft or water runways on the map. So there's smaller airports, show empty airports on the map. So these are airports that are not officially staffed, I guess. We can show VOR stations on the map. We can show NDB stations on the map. We can show the fixes, and you will see nothing at the moment. Remember we said that you could configure how much data you see at zoom levels. So if I zoom in a bit further, suddenly there are nav aids everywhere. If I zoom in a bit further, we can see their names. It's worth pointing out the map we are seeing of the country in the background is OpenStreetMap by default. We can change that. So if we want to have OpenTopoMap, there it goes. OpenTopoMap comes out into its own when you zoom out, and it starts to show you relief of the hills around. So if we zoom back in, there are various other less busy maps. You can see it's streaming this map from the internet, so it doesn't keep it on your system. There's various other maps, and it will go and stream them straight off the internet. And there's one there that's quite nice for doing air traffic control. There's some simple offline ones which don't need to be streamed, so if you're just planning a quick flight and you're not really interested in what cities or anything you're nearby, it's useful. But I'm going to put it back on StreetMap. Okay, so let's zoom out. Our aeroplane is over there at Stansted. What else can we switch on? We can switch on the ILS feathers, and you can suddenly see you get a display next to an airport of the radio frequency, the direction, and the angle of the glide slope, and whether it has DME or not. You can show Victor Airways, so if we zoom out a little bit, we can see them. We can show Jet Airways, the high altitude airways. Select user features. So this is things like range rings, measurement lines, so we can draw all over the map if we want. So for example, say if we were looking at Stansted, there's lots of nice tricks. So say we wanted to know what the bearing is from Stansted over to this beacon over here. We can right click, for example, and it's not letting me show it. Let's go back up here and say I want to allow measurement lines. So right click. I can now measure great circle, I think it is, distance, or rum distance. It's just different projection methods. So great circle distance, and you can now see I can draw on the map. So it's rubber banding a line between where I selected the option and where I put the mouse next. So I can go and click with the left mouse button over here, or maybe over, say it was to this little airport over here, so I can see the label easily, or this radio beacon here. I can left click and it will stay there. So obviously while you're in flight, you can be drawing diagrams on the map that you need to help you with your flight. You can right click on that line and remove it again afterwards. You right click on the end of it. So when you're planning for several aircraft to come into the same runway, for example, you could purposely draw extend a line out from the ILS, so you could have people joining the line. What else can you do? You can show anything that you've highlighted, so you can have user data in the map as well. A good example for doing that is you might right click on an airport and add a user point. So in other words, that becomes a user defined airport that you've highlighted. You can see one is here. What I've essentially done, if we turn off, or if we zoom out slightly, we will see more of them around the map. Those black airports. All that means is I have gone around and highlighted a lot of the airports that have got more detailed scenery, so I know at a glance when I'm planning a flight if that's a really good airport to land at. Anyway, let's zoom back in. So you can show the simulator aircraft trail on the map. So I'll say yes. So if I go and did a flight and flew around, you would see a dotted line behind the aircraft of where it's been. Show a compass rose around the aircraft, so that's useful if you're trying to figure out direction to fly to get somewhere, and it will stay with the aircraft overlaid on the map. But this isn't really what LittleNavMap's all about. This is just a map at the end of the day. It's no better than looking at a map inside the simulator. LittleNavMap is really great at planning flights, and to do that we need to show a few more windows. So I have purposely removed all the windows to show you that this is configurable. So if we go to the window menu at the top, before we get to that, let's show some other things. We can go and show, I've on purpose I've showed all of the overlays for the air traffic control sections, sectors, whatever you want to call them. So you can select what you want shown in these various options along here. So you've got the different classes of airspace, you've got different types of sectors that you might want to shown or not. So we can show, for example, this is for example VATSIM. So you can suddenly see some broad areas. So when you're going between sections, you know when to contact the center controls, for example. We can go further down from that, and we can say we want the approach to yeah, it's not going to show at the moment. I don't think I've got all the data for it. But you can certainly see the various different airports. Anyway, let's not get too bothered by all of that. So we can show the sectors, air traffic control sectors that we're flying in and out of. Okay, so we want to show some windows. So there are several other windows that we can add, and they are all dockable. So the first one we might want is search, so we can find places quickly. So if we're putting a flight plan in, we might want to search for the nav waypoints easily and quickly, or the airports even. So we are going to show search, and it is docked over to the left hand side. And you can see it has multiple tabs to help you search for particular things. So just to show you how this works, as we drag it around, the screen will rearrange itself to make room for it. I'm holding the left mouse button down as I drag it. So when I'm happy with where I want it, and I'll leave it over this side, I'm going to let go of the left mouse button and it will dock itself automatically. The margin between the map and the docked window will become draggable. And this is true of all of the docked windows. So we're showing search, so it's highlighted there in the list now. We want to show flight planning. Again, I usually keep flight planning over on that side. It doesn't have to be there. If you want it in a particular layout, you could put it down there if you want. I happen to think it's great over here because once you've got a number of waypoints, they will show up over here. We can also show an information panel. Again, this is shown in the wrong place. I prefer information to be below my flight planning waypoints. So I can, for example, I could right click on this airport here and show information, and it will bring up all the information on the airport, all the weather nearby, what runways it has. You can find out airports that are near it and how far away they are. You can find out the current weather via the internet at that airport. So it's really useful for figuring out flight plans, deciding what runways you're going to use, for example. Quite often on a big airport it will say which is the preferred runway based on the weather. Back in the Windows menu, we have a flight plan elevation profile. This won't make any sense to begin with, so I am going to drag it and I'm going to drop it underneath the map, so it doesn't take up the full width of the screen, it just appears in here. Again, you might switch some of this off while you're in flight because it's too busy and you don't need all the information. I'm also going to have a look and see what simulator aircraft is. Again, this shows you the status of your aircraft and other people's aircraft. So you can see AI or multiplayer aircraft are listed in here. You can see progress across a flight plan. So if your FMC decides to go on the fritz in one of the big airliners, you can actually double back and look in here to see what's really going on with where you are in terms of the flight plan. So we haven't made a flight plan yet. So for a very quick example, I'm going to do a flight plan from Stansted, which is where we're sat at the moment. And I'm going to, should we do a flight over to Manchester? So what I'm going to do is zoom in on the map so we can see Stansted. So we've got nothing in the flight plan at the moment. We're going to right click on Stansted and we're going to say set airport London Stansted as the flight plan departure. So any airport you right click on, you get that option. So make it the departure and it starts to fill in the flight plan for us. We can then zoom back out just to get the end points of this route figured out. And we're going to go over to Manchester, EGCC, and we're going to right click on it and we're going to set airport Manchester as a flight plan destination. So now suddenly you can see on the map, if I zoom out, we've got it showing the distance and the bearing from the departure to the destination. So 127 nautical miles, 315 degrees. That is going to show great circle routes, so those lines will become curved on longer routes because the map is obviously shown in Mercator projection. So you can see there's a very slight curve on that already. So we obviously know that the flight plan isn't complete. We might want to leave Stansted on a particular procedure, on a standard instrument departure. So if we right click on Stansted again, it's worth pointing out, look, when I hovered over Stansted it told me a summary of information as a tooltip all about the airport. If we right click on the airport, we can show departure procedures for Stansted. So if we show that, and this will list out all of the standard departures. So say I was planning to use runway 4, you obviously see the SIDs for 4 here. If I click on one with the left mouse button, it will superimpose it onto the map so I can see it. I can zoom out and I can go through them all in the same way. So I can just have a look at the various departures for runway 4. So we'll have a look at that one. If we wanted that added into our flight plan, we right click on this instrument departure and we insert the SID into the flight plan, and it automatically adjusts and adds the missing part of the flight plan, between the end of what we have planned and the destination. It just wraps it on to join it automatically. To get to Manchester, rather than dragging around the map, we can just double click on it on the flight plan. We can do that with any of these points. So if I double click on any of these waypoints, we get to see them. So if I double click on Manchester, that's where we're going to end up. So if we zoom out slightly, and by the same token we were able to do a standard instrument departure, we can have a look at the instrument approaches or standard approach routes. So if we right click, show arrival procedures for Manchester, and you've got the approaches and the stars. So we can have a look at, say we were looking at coming in, you can see that if we zoom further out, some of the stars are quite significant. it's an international airport, so it's taking traffic from all over the place. So we won't bother with a standard approach, but we will use an instrument approach for runway 5 right, for example. So we've got ILS for runway 5 right. So that's how it would look. So we can right click on the approach ILS 5 right, and we can insert it into our flight plan, and it wraps the missing, the connecting part of the flight plan from the beginning of the approach. So then we might want to say, well, shall we find some radio beacons to navigate via on the way? Now we can either do that by hand, or we can come up here and you can see some buttons up here. So at the moment it's doing a direct flight plan. We can calculate radio navade for the flight plan. So if I just click that, it's basically looked for sensible navades to use en route. I think it looks up kind of around 100 nautical miles between them kind of range. Again, all of that's configurable. We could do the same thing with high altitude routes. I won't bother with it today. But you could go for the Victor Airways, you could go for the Jet Airways. You can base it on your flight plan altitude. So you can see above the flight plan window over here, I've said I'm going to fly at 6,500 feet. That's obviously wrong. So we'll say we were going to fly at 20,000 feet, which is again a bit too high for such a short route. So we'll go for 10,000 feet all the way. Now if you've noticed while I was doing that, the elevation profile has come to life since we put the flight plan in. So if we zoom, or I can drag this around to see it, and we can zoom in on this using the mouse wheel as well. So if we want to see more detail, we can. So suddenly we have an accurate plot. Again, this is using the data from the internet of the map. We get an accurate plot of the ground underneath the aircraft, and you get highlighted minimum altitudes shown that you should stay above during the various sections of the flight. Also, if a procedure has rules on particular points in the procedure, you will see the minimum and maximum altitudes rendered into the plan. And again, if you've got a nice aircraft that can follow that data in the flight plan, like a study level Airbus or something like that, it will follow the VNAV data from the flight plan. I've tried it. So you can see this is figuring out top of climb, top of descent automatically. How is it doing that? How does it know that our aircraft can behave in such a way to get to those points at those times? So if I just drag this down a bit, the way it's doing that is, if we look in the aircraft menu, it has the idea of aircraft performance. Now on the website you can configure them yourself. So if I say edit aircraft performance, you can fill in all the numbers for average climb speeds, descent speeds, how much fuel, what your fuel burn rate is, what contingency fuel is, and you can say what the aircraft is. So this is all pre-configured for the Boeing 737-800X, and it's the Zibo one. So for X-Plane, if I go and look in the LittleNavMap website, I can look in other downloads, and you can see there's some aircraft performances that they make available for you. So if, for example, if we look in X-Plane, you can see a lot of common aircraft, and in amongst them is the Boeing 737-800X Zibo. So I've just downloaded that file and I'm using it in my performance files. But there's nothing to stop you making your own. Rather cleverly, I've never tried this, you can get the simulator to record performance and to figure it out for itself. So you can restart aircraft performance collection. So while you're flying a flight, you can have the LittleNavMap program watching the performance of your airplane to figure out the fuel burn rate, to figure out the ascent and descent rate. So yeah, it's all very clever stuff. The real trick behind that is now we have our flight plan and we've set our altitude. We can look in a fuel report and it's already figured out, based on the performance data, how much fuel we need. Based, taking into account on our performance page of how much reserve fuel we typically want to carry and all that kind of thing. So it will do all the calculations for you very quickly. And it's also basing it on the wind. So that's something I haven't got to actually. I can show the wind on the map, and it pulls it from the internet. So we could show at 10,000 feet, and you get these wind indicators showing up all over the map. And it's telling you there 74 degrees and 12 knots. And you get these little indicators to show the direction of the wind and the strength of the wind. So if we zoom out, you'll start to see that. So you see it for the whole world. If you, again, it's selective based on the zoom level you're at, and that can all be configured. So yeah, if we were now to go jump into the simulator and fly this route, you would see the aeroplane moving, and you would see a dotted line forming behind it. So I'm going to turn the wind off because I'm not really interested. You only really get interested in the wind if you're on a very long haul flight, or if you're trying to avoid a storm and you've got all the realistic weather switched on, all that kind of thing. Or if you're low on fuel and you don't want to be flying in the headwind, into a headwind to get to the destination, you might reroute. So yeah, there's LittleNavMap. You can save your flight plans, and it will save it as a PLN file. Notice there's various other options here, so you can export to other aircraft formats, and it supports lots and lots of formats for saving flight plans. You can save it straight to the X-Plane FMS plans folder. So if you're not aware of that, if we go and look inside X-Plane, if we look in Output and FMS plans, you can see there's a number of my old plans. When you're within the simulator, you can enter a company route, for example, or in the G1000 navigation systems, you can. There's various ways of loading a saved flight plan in. In the 737, you put it in as a company route, and you just type in the letters. So yeah, but if you just go to the file menu in LittleNavMap once you've prepared your flight, and you save as an X-Plane FMS 11, and it will give you a warning that there's various bits of data that it won't be saved because of the format. You can save as FMS 11 again just to confirm it. And it remembers that I've told it in the past where to put that, and I can just save it. So then in X-Plane, which I'll show you next, I can put in our company route as EGSS EGCC, and it will load this. So let's go and try it to see what happens. So we're paused in X-Plane, and we want to go and look at the FMC, and we will clear the warning about the nav data, because that's just because I haven't got a Navigraph subscription. So if we go to the route page, we're going from EGSS to EGCC. And this is a trick of X-Plane really. If we fill this into the company route page on the 737, it will look in that folder for the flight plan whose file name matches that, and it will load it. So we click, and it's loaded it, and it's saying activate, and we can say yes and execute. So if we go now and look on our flight plan, there you can see straight away on the MFD here showing the route. If we zoom out, we can see the whole route. And again, if you've ever played around with the FMC, you know, we can step through the route and do all sorts of tricks. So let's have a look. If I zoom out slightly, and I've forgotten how this works. Oh, I don't want to clear anything. Whoops. Yeah, so you could step through the route and have a look around it. But yeah, so that shows that we were able to take the plan directly from LittleNavMap and put it straight into the simulator. What other nice things can we do? Just to whet your appetite, I'm not going to show you everything in this video. This is really just a brief demo of the program and some of its core features. It's worth saying this little aeroplane will be superimposed onto here as well, and it's also worth pointing out, if you watch my mouse move on the elevation profile, you'll see a circle move on the map. So you can figure out, if you're looking at where a hill is, where it is on the map, because it might not be obvious. Or if you can figure out where my top of descent is, I can look in terms of the map, so I know kind of for any features that I might use to know if I'm getting near it. You will also see radio beacons will be added to the elevation profile, so you can see where they are as well. So a few other little tricks we can do. Say we were going to go and fly with VATSIM, the Virtual Air Traffic Control System. We can go into the Tools menu, and we can go into Options, and there's a ton of things to do with configuration of the program, but one of them is online flying. So what if we wanted to see who's in VATSIM today? Apply. OK. And there come the aircraft. It took a few seconds to go and load them. So it will update every couple of minutes, basically showing you other air traffic, and we can zoom out and we can see the other airplanes. So those are the people that are flying on VATSIM at the moment across mainland Europe. If we go and zoom out and go over to America, is there anybody using it? Yeah, there's a few people in America. So it's really quite useful, and obviously once you're connected to VATSIM, this comes into its own of being able to show the centres, for example. So if we were to hover over a centre, it's going to tell you the frequencies for that centre, which is quite useful when you're flying around. So anyway, so NavSim, as well as doing all the flight planning, it actually works as kind of a bit of a workstation. And if you were doing a group flight using SimConnect or JoinFS, you obviously are going to see those aircraft on the map as well, and it's really useful for doing that. So you could actually use it as air traffic control if you're using... It's better with Flight Simulator, to be honest, or with... It will work with FS 2020, by the way. Although it can't load the scenery data from Flight Sim 2020, it understands SimConnect, and Flight Simulator 2020 uses SimConnect. So it will work in exactly the same way. You just have to rely on data at the moment from other simulators to superimpose onto your map. I'm sure that update will be coming. I think that'll do for the moment. I've probably blown your brains trying to do a quick tour of some of the more important features. There's an awful lot more it can do in terms of, if I just quickly point out, we could go and add nav points to our flight plan just by right-clicking on them and adding them, for example. But it becomes very useful, say if you have an emergency in flight and you need to replan. You can obviously change your plan at the drop of a hat and disregard the FMC and just fly vectors for the rest of your route if you absolutely have to. Or, set it up in LittleNavMap first, then go and reprogram your FMC in your airliner or, light aircraft to match what you're doing. But yeah, that's LittleNavMap. It's a fantastic piece of software. Okay, I think I'll end it there.